Alright, so welcome back to the Blender Python tutorial series. This is part 4 of the series. In this part we're going to be looking at our third button operator that we're coding, as well as starting to organize these buttons into code that can be put into the user interface. So our third and final button that we're going to want to code is the update button. Now the purpose of this button is to, along with our add and remove buttons, move our focal point around the scene easily. Now right now, to add something and to move it around, what I need to do is press add, and then it's going to add in our empty to set the focus to that. But what I want this to do, when I change the 3D cursor, instead of adding another empty like this, which can't be read by the camera to lock the focus to, I want to move the existing empty to wherever my 3D cursor is with the click of a button. So to do this, I'm going to basically be combining both of these buttons and parts from each of them into one block of code. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new text file here, and I'm going to call this update. And how I'm going to start this is with our first line of code, import BPY. And that's going to allow the Python to use the BPY module. Now first of all, what we want to do is to incorporate some of our code from the delete or remove button. First off, what we're going to want to do is select the camera and assign the aperture or our blur amount from the camera to a variable to preserve it. So our first line of code we're going to want to do is the code that selects the camera. So we already know that this line of code sets the active object to the camera. So we're going to copy that over. And then our next line down, we're going to assign the current aperture to a variable. So we're going to make a variable like this, current underscore aperture equals, and then where we have our block of code for the aperture. So I think that should be under here. Yeah, it's part of this. We'll just take this line right here, copy it over, and there we go. We've assigned our camera data to a variable, current underscore aperture. Alright, our next line is going to be to take a block of code from our remove function and copy it over. So it's just going to be these 3 lines of code right here. What this is doing, to review, is disabling the depth of field, removing any link to our focus object, and setting the default aperture back to the start. Now the reason why I'm going through all these lines of code instead of simply using a move command is because I want to set everything back to the beginning, and moving an object around with lines of code and snapping it to the 3D cursor, in the normal interface is pretty easy. You just press Shift S and it will bring up this thing where you can snap things to the cursor. But to do this, it's a little more, how should I say it, complicated than just using our existing lines of code. So that's just what we're going to do for this. If I wanted to do more advanced methods, then I would want to learn how to do that before trying to teach you guys. So our next block is also going to be from the remove function. Oh, sorry. Where is our... Oh, no, it's just this. We're going to take the remove, this stuff, and put it into our update file, and that's just going to remove the different empties from the scene. Sorry, my notes were a little disorganized there. So what we're doing to review is assigning our empty, our camera focus empty to object, deselecting all, then selecting the object again, selecting anything connected to that object, and then deleting it. And now all we're going to want to do is run the add function, basically. We're going to select the camera and then basically just add in another empty. Oops. So yeah, we're selecting the camera, enabling depth of field, adding an empty to the new location of the 3D cursor, after we moved it, of course, assigning the same name to it so the camera can recognize it. And then there we go. We've got setting our aperture. Now, remember up here we assigned our camera aperture to a variable. So we're just going to take this variable and put it down in here in the place of 1. So now we're reassigning that to preserve the blur. So let's go ahead and attempt to run this. We're going to just go into Eevee here, into render view, and let my computer take a quick minute. Alright, so let's add our depth of field then, or rather remove it, as it seems that we've already got some. We're gonna, okay, there we go. Let's add it. And we've got a nice blur. So let's say we want to move our focus point over to here. All we have to do is run our update function, and with any luck, there we go. The focal point has been changed to over here instead of what was over there. And now we can use a remove button to take it away, and there we go, everything works perfectly. So the next part of this episode is to start combining this into classes and functions that we can use to create a UI. So Blender comes with a lot of handy templates for you to do this sort of thing. So if we open up a new text document and look under templates, we see Python, and we can select on operator simple. And all this code gets imported in here. We have a function that we can then connect to our class, and so it'll basically execute this function within the class when we call it with this ID name down in our UI. And you'll see how this all fits together in the next couple of tutorials. So first of all, we can delete this class method as we don't really need to use it for this particular version of Blender. And we can also delete this stuff down at the bottom. Now in Blender, you need to register your classes, and this will allow them to be able to be run when you import this into Blender as an add-on. But for now, we're just going to worry about this main thing up here. So first of all, we're just going to change the name to, let's do the add button first, add, to have just some simplicity here. I'll just class this also add. And we also don't need our tooltip. And let's make an ID name. So let's just call it object object.addFocus, I guess. That makes sense. And then this this label is what's going to be shown on our UI button in the next tutorial. So we can just say add focal point, I guess. There we go. Now under this add function, what we can just do is take this block of code. We don't need import PPY since it's already been imported in our operator, and copy that in here to make sure it's all tabbed over to follow the proper syntax. And then what this will do is when we call on our class, it will run our execute function when the button is pressed, and that will run our add function up here. We just need to make sure it's actually linked to the add function, and then we'll return finish, which Blender will read and do something with that I don't understand. And then under here we already have it registered, and it's using some sort of class right here, and we just need to change this to add. Now, same for unregister. This will allow you to uninstall the add-on if you want. there we go. This is one. Now what we can do is copy the function and the class, maybe move down a line or so, and paste it in. And now we can use this for our remove function. So we'll say remove, and same thing for the class. We can class it as remove, object.remove focus, because this is our remove class. And our label name is remove focal point. That makes sense. We'll just link it up to our function, and then all we need to do is copy this register and unregister again, to make sure that our class gets registered on startup. So we'll just take our remove, I guess. So put that in here, copy that down, and there we go. I'll just change it to unregister. Okay, and hopefully that is working, and if it doesn't, then in the next tutorial I'll go over some changes that we need to make, because I'm not, this doesn't really do anything per se, because we don't have any buttons connected to this, so registering these classes won't really run anything, or it will run the code, but it won't, change anything within the interface, so there's no point to really run it. But in the next tutorial we'll go over some debugging if we need to, because I might have forgotten the line of something. And we'll just do this one more time for our update function. And I've just realized that I haven't taken the remove stuff. Actually, I've just copied the add function, so we should probably change that before I forget. And then I'm going to tab it over and take my update lines of code and then select it. Sorry if there's any noise in the background, it's just my family moving around. And then copy this in here. And this should be running the correct blocks of code now. And we'll change our name to update and object.update focus, and then our label is update focal point. And this can be whatever you want. And I mean, so can this. You just need to remember it when you call on this ID name in our button. We just will register it and unregister it as well. And then those are our 3 buttons set up in the respective classes and functions, and everything's just a little more organized now. By the way, this thing down here you absolutely must have. And I've tried it with different names, I guess, instead of main, like update or remove or something, but it's a little buggy, so I just recommend using main and not changing this around. Otherwise our register function might not get called, and therefore our buttons might not appear when we're on our UI step. So just something to keep in mind. Just going to look over this one more time, make sure we have our correct blocks of code. And yes, there was a typo here that I want to fix. Remove. And there we go. In the next tutorial, we'll look at the UI and how we can link buttons to each of these classes and have them run their functions. And there should only be 2 more parts to this series, the UI part and getting everything imported into Blender so it runs automatically on startup. So thanks for watching. This was a bit of a longer tutorial, like 15 minutes or so. But yeah, see you in the next one.